Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Sacker. My guest today is a Welsh rugby legend who confronted one of the last great taboos in professional sport by publicly revealing his own homosexuality while still playing at the top level. Gareth Thomas's honesty won him admiration within and far beyond the world of rugby. But has it changed anything for other gay sportsmen? And what other awkward truths lie behind the public mask donned by sports elite performers? Gareth Thomas, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thanks for having me here.
Let's start by talking a little bit about Welsh rugby. The Welsh have just scored a massive triumph, won the Six Nations tournament here in Europe, trounced England to actually win it. Do you feel as passionately about Welsh rugby now as you did when you were a player?
I think more so now, if possible. I think when you become a fan, you still have a connection with the team, whether you've played there or not. And, you know, for Wales to do well, on a Monday morning, people go to work happy. The whole nation is happy. So the whole nation is part of rugby. And I think with Welsh rugby doing so well at the moment in kind of an economic crisis where people have a lot of things to worry about, it just makes people happier. So everyone who has a connection with Wales is always a part of the team.
I just wonder, when you talk about that connection with the team, whether it's the same for you now, because, you know, you've been through this personal journey that we're going to talk about at some length, and I just wonder, when you go back to the National Stadium, as you do, you work in the media a lot, you see former teammates, you mix with the crowds, is there still that same bond for you that there was?
Probably more so, again, because people are so accepting of me now. And I felt, you know, before when I was playing or when I was ever doing anything, a supporter or a fan is the reason why, you know, you get paid to do your job, or is the reason why you have a great atmosphere in the stadium, which adds to the whole experience. So in a way I felt a bit of a fraud sometimes, because people will come in to watch me, and people will come in to watch me as a sportsman. And I always believe that the best form of any sportsman is to be an honest person and an honest sportsman. So now, when I speak to people, or people say they support me, and they know exactly who I am, 100%, then actually I have a better connection with them, and I feel much more comfortable with them, and they feel much more comfortable with me.
Very interesting you put it in that way, and immediately you talk about honesty and exposing who you really are. I mean, how much of a drag was it for you? How difficult was it for you to spend pretty much all of your rugby union career until the very end living a lie?
Yeah, it was difficult, but I think at the very start I didn't really realise I was living a lie, because I managed to kind of create this alter ego person.
But you, sorry to interrupt, but you have said, and again, searingly honest, you've said that frankly by the time you were 16 or 17, you sort of knew that you were gay, that you were different and gay.
Yeah, I knew I was different, and I think knowing and accepting are two completely different things. And I came to kind of this crossroads in my life of, you know, do I choose life or do I choose rugby? And at that crossroads I decided to choose rugby, because to me rugby was everything I'd ever wanted. And like every kid growing up, I wanted my parents to be proud of me. I wanted my family to be proud of me. And I thought this was the direction I would go to get that. So I chose at that age to choose rugby. So anything else,
how could you choose rugby over life? How could you choose a sport where you felt that you had to be inherently dishonest to make a success of participation in that sport?
Because to me it defined who I was. I've always felt, even to this day, even not playing rugby, that kind of the reason that I was put on this earth was to play rugby. So for me, for my parents to have got up every weekend, to have driven me and my two brothers the lengths and breadths of the UK to play rugby, to me, to all of a sudden have thrown that away would have been a complete waste.
But wasn't there a little part of you that hated rugby at the very same time? Because it was robbing you of the chance to express you know, a very large part of who you were, your sexual identity.
Yeah, it was. Kind of rugby is the best and worst thing that ever happened to me, because it put me on a pedestal where people wanted to know everything about me and kind of felt they had a right to know everything about me. Yet it was the greatest thing because it was what I'd always wanted to do.
But here's a question for you. Imagine that you hadn't been a rugby player. If you had not been a very successful rugby player from a young age, would you have been more honest with your family? Would you have told them who you really were much earlier?
I think probably. I think because I was in the spotlight, and when you become a sportsman, whether you like it or not, you become a role model for many people, and also people look so intensely into your life that it kind of became a non-question for me. I couldn't come out because I felt I wanted this so much, and everybody had put so much into it that, you know, times are changing really quickly. I think what we need to remember is that we're not talking about me as a person right now in this era. You know, it was the early 90s, and, you know, I was playing rugby with people who were playing rugby in the same team as me, who were black and were getting thrown bananas at on the field. So for me to have revealed my sexuality, I wouldn't have wanted to put my jersey on and be proud to play rugby every weekend, yet knowing I'm walking into a furnace of abuse, because I need to enjoy what I was doing and I needed to focus what I was on what I was doing, and I wouldn't have been able to do that.
And never mind the furnace of abuse, I mean, was it your view at the time quite clearly that there is no way that you would have progressed, that you would have gone through the regional teams and into the Welsh national team and been a top player if you'd been openly gay? Was that clearly impossible as far as you were concerned?
As far as I was concerned, yes, and I've asked, you know, friends who I'm still really good friends now, who I played with back when I first started, and they said no. They said you wouldn't have been able to do it because literally it was such a different environment, and I wouldn't have been able to be the player that I am now, because then I wouldn't have been able to focus and concentrate. You know, if you're a professional sports person, you need to be 100% in that moment constantly, not worrying what someone's going to say in the crowd or what someone's going to throw at you. You need to be focused 100% and not worry about anything else.
I can understand all of that. I guess what I'm struggling to get my head around is the most private thoughts you had about, for example, the relationship you had with your wife, Gemma. Because in a way, what you're saying is you had to go through the motions of being a normal sort of heterosexual man because that was part of who you had to project as yourself for the means of rugby. But I mean, you know, you got married, and I know you felt very strongly toward your wife. You loved her, you'd known her for many, many years, but you were just lying to her all the time.
I think the thing was, you know, I lied to Gemma, but people sometimes find this hard to understand in the fact that as a human being, I fell in love with Gemma. I took to many forms of trying to make myself straight, to be who I thought everybody and society thought I should be. So I found religion, and I believed that if I went to a church, which I did very often, if I did my vows in front of God, if I did everything that I thought a normal human being would do, then that would actually
somehow it would be self-fulfilling
for me to be able to be what everybody and what I thought everybody wanted me to be. So it was kind of a process.
Gareth, Thomas, we have to be honest. I mean, because that's the point of the show. You at the very same time as you were trying to do that, and you were doing these things with Gemma, including obviously the marriage and trying to have kids together. After away games in London, for example, with your club, you couldn't resist the temptation to go to gay bars and to have sex, gay sex, and I just don't know how you, for years, managed to maintain any sort of equanimity and stability with that.
I think
deception.
You know, going to gay bars and having sex with men was very, very rare. It wasn't like an often occurrence, and I kind of felt to myself there was kind of a part of me that I needed to satisfy, and once I satisfied that part, I could switch off from that person that needed that satisfaction and then go back and be the perfect husband. And that's where I kind of found this separation of character, because I wanted to please everybody else, and I wanted everybody to kind of like Gareth Thomas, the rugby player, but then I also had a part of me that had to try and please who I was, but that was only a very, very small part. And once I could get rid of that, I could try to please everyone else.
And you'd done it for so long, and I guess what is so striking about you in the end was that you took a decision to end the deception, and so many people don't, but you did. And 2006 was the year that really mattered, because that's when you were honest. You came out to your wife, and then at the other end of the year, I think later on, you told your first teammates and coach.
Yeah.
Some had already suspected it, hadn't they?
Yeah.
But which was more difficult, telling your family or telling your teammates?
Without a doubt, my family. Obviously, telling Gemma, because, you know, whatever anybody says, I'm not proud of the way I acted. So when I sat Gemma down to tell her, obviously, I had huge fears, because I didn't want to break somebody's heart. And I realised that was what I was going to do. But also, I kind of realised that it's not selfish for me to tell her, because I should tell her, because she needs to have a life at an age where she can still go out and get a life. So telling my wife, and then telling my parents, because in the build-up to telling my parents, you know, with everything I was going through, because when you lie every day, if you're a human being, when you lie every day, you begin to hate yourself, because it's not a nice thing to do. So, you know, I'd reached suicidal points because I just hated who I was for what I was doing to other people. And, you know,
literally.
Oh, yeah. Literally, you know, there's times when I've tried, and there's times when I've come close to trying. And, you know, I thank God that, you know, it never actually happened. But, you know, like I said, to be a decent human being and lie every day and not feel bad about it, then you're not really a decent human being. So, you know, for me to do these lies, and then I had to undo the lies, and by undoing the lie, there's only one way, and that was telling the truth. But what I didn't want was, because I understand that kind of a lot of my life had been based around a lie, the people that I had involved in my lie, I didn't want them to hate me for it. I wanted them to try and understand me for why I felt I had to do it. So telling my wife, my parents, all I wanted was an understanding of them, an understanding why they realised that I needed to do this.
And did you get it?
I did. I had it in abundance, and not only that, I had a lot of respect for finally being honest. You know, even all them years, which I will never forgive myself for lying, I can always be proud of actually finally saying, for all the lies I did, I untangled them in one sentence, and that was just by being honest.
Well, that was the family. The teammates is interesting too, because you got it so clearly into your head that you could not be, you know, a top-level rugby player and gay, and then you sort of proved you could, because players knew from 2006 onward. You played internationally, I think, till 07, but you carried on playing top-level club rugby and then rugby league until 2010, 2011. Yeah, and people knew you were gay.
Yeah, and it's I don't know. It was this fear, because I'd created this kind of dark, horrible, I'd say almost homophobic world, because I felt I had to create this because I had to justify why I lied every day. And my justification was, well, I need to, because I'm not a stereotypical rugby player, so I need to lie to become a stereotypical rugby player. But when I told my closest friends, and then all of a sudden publicly came out, what I realised, that top sport is not about your sexuality. It's about your ability, and it's about giving as much in the person next as the person next to you does, and that is all it's about. It's being, and I like to sum it up really by just all it's about is being honest in everything you do, in life, in sport. Honesty will always get you a tap on the back.
So, if that is what you've concluded, and I know that you now, you know, you're a public figure for those sports people who want to be open and honest about their sexuality. When people call you who are at elite level performance inside sport, and they say, Gareth, you know, I'm living a lie, I don't know what to do about it. Is your advice now to come out, that it works, that it can happen, you can be both honest about your sexuality if you're gay and continue with an elite career?
My advice has to be kind of based on individual needs, because every story is very similar, yet every story is unique, because that person is unique in some way. So to me, why my story was successful is because I had the support of my ex-wife, I had the support of my teammates, the support of my family. And the story of me being gay, I don't think that's really a story. It's what I did after, was the story and the success. It's like I said, because when you become a sportsman, you become a public figure, and people follow that story. So I think what needs to happen is, my first kind of words to the sports people that ring me is, what needs to happen is, are you going to go somewhere positive after this? Because if you're going to go somewhere negative after this, all this does is the person who's going to come after you is just going to see a negative story, and that's not going to be good. And when we say sport, I think people see sport as such a big thing, but actually you can break sport down. Now, to me, there's absolutely no homophobia, as far as I'm concerned, within sporting people, as in player to player.
But there is in fans.
To teammate. And I think when you go to fans, I think that's where the difference lies. And fans, can they be classed as sport, or can they be classed as society? Because they come in off the street, they stand on, they don't give the commitment that the player does. They give the support, but not the commitment.
But this is what I want to get to. You know, you are now a very high-profile campaigner to root all forms of prejudice out of sport. And, you know, let's face it, it's racism as well as homophobia. But I'm fascinated to know, when you went on that pitch playing, I think, for Crusaders in Rugby League, and you went up to Castleford, I think, and you faced a storm of abuse, and they later got fined tens of thousands of pounds for it. You looked hate in the eye when you looked at some of those faces in the crowd.
Yeah, but I didn't enjoy it. You know, I remember standing there when the abuse was coming and thinking to myself, why did I do this? Why did I make this announcement to stand on the field that I've always dreamt of being on and just get an abuse? I can't concentrate on playing rugby, because I've got to concentrate on what's going on around me, because these people are calling my name. It's impossible to switch off.
Did you hate back? Did you hate them?
Oh, no, because I think what happens is you kind of learn to understand. And what I learned to understand was that, you know, I was the first person to do this. So by being the first person to do something, you're always going to get a form of abuse. But what happens is, actually, when you look at it, you realise that that abuse is a good thing. Because if you want to set any precedents, the only way change can happen is if people stamp out. So when this abuse was given to me, and the Rugby League came in, they banned the people who shouted it, they fined the club. When I went back there the year after, nothing was said. I was applauded. So in a way, I realised that actually what I did means I have to tread a path for somebody else to follow. It's not easy, but I think that's the fear.
And this idea of treading a path, you know, I know you've looked at other sports, not just at rugby. Professional football has a problem. We know it has a problem with homophobia. And we know that perhaps the most high-profile British English league player, who came out after he'd finished playing, ended up committing suicide not so very long afterwards. The most recent example, a young player who'd signed for Leeds United, he ended up just a few weeks ago announcing that he was, in his words, withdrawing from football to make space to find himself away from football, suggesting he couldn't really come out, be gay, and continue in his career. Do you think there are some sports which have yet to tackle this in any way?
Yeah, you know, I do. And I think when I look at football, for instance, because this is one of the biggest sports in the world, if not the biggest sport in the world, you know, within football itself as a game, I think professional players are professional players and they respect other people. But, you know, when you see players are retiring because they don't want to, you know, they don't want to go every week to a place where they're going to be abused. You wouldn't want to come into work every day thinking all you're going to get is 50,000 people shouting at you. So when I look at football, I think the only way you stop it is you start at the top. You know, we have a massive network and a great thing for racism, to stamp out racism where there should be no place for in football. Yet why is any form of abuse levelled? Does racism seem a lot higher than homophobia? I think they all need to be tackled as much, because it affects whoever the participant is being affected by it equally as much.
I just want to end with some thoughts, not so much just about your experience coming out as a gay man playing rugby, but also your experience of professional sport as the ultimate sort of pressure cooker, mental pressure cooker. I've spoken to quite a few sportsmen on this programme, some of whom, like the international cricketer Marcus Trescothick, have been very open about depression within professional sport at the most elite levels. Do you think in some ways being a professional sportsman can be bad for your mental health?
It's very difficult, because the pressure on a sportsman is unbelievable. and the pressure to perform is constant, and to perform to the best of your ability.
But also exposing vulnerability, something that is not really acceptable in many dressing rooms at the elite level.
And I think, you know, I think the more people talk openly and honestly about who they are, and people understand that actually these people ain't just professional sports people, they're people. And I think when people understand that, then it takes a lot of pressures off anything that you fear.
And what about a player who's been at the very top, you know, 100 caps for Wales, one of the top try scorers ever for the country, and then you leave the game, and, you know, you left it in particular circumstances, but basically, however you leave it, the adulation goes, the adrenaline rush goes, the money, to a certain extent at least, goes. How does a professional sportsman find himself afterwards?
I remember the day I finished playing, I suppose the best word to describe how I felt was afraid. Because all I'd ever wanted in my life and all I ever knew in my life had all of a sudden stopped. Now, at the age of 36, a lot of my friends are slowly climbing the ladder and have all settled down jobs. And then all of a sudden at 36,
You've reached the top of your ladder, and your ladder's
I'm on a pension. I have nowhere else to go, because the only place for me is to start at the bottom of the ladder again. But I decided to not be afraid of what I don't know, to be excited by the uncertainty, and I think that takes a certain mindset. So I decided to do that, and I decided as well is every professional sportsman, when they finish, somewhere in their career has been through difficult times, you know, whether it be personal or whether it be professional, and the best thing to do, I felt, was to help the next generation of people, to stop them going through difficult times in whatever you experienced, because of the experience gives you great kind of accolade to be able to help these kids. And that's what I've decided to do, is help a lot of children, help a lot of people, adults, get through whatever may be happening in their life. Because my story, whether it be about me being homosexual or anything else, is a story about going through a bad time and then getting to a good place. And everybody's life goes through a bad time, and hopefully with my help I can get them to a good place.
I just wonder how you feel about the fact that despite, you know, being perhaps arguably one of the greatest Welsh rugby players of your generation, you will always now be associated with a decision that made you unique as a sportsman, coming out while still playing at the top level. You know, and I just noticed, for example, on your CV now, you've got things you wouldn't expect, like top of the Pink list in a vote in 2010, voted one of the most influential gay people in the UK, Stonewall's Hero of the Year, voted in October 2010. I mean, these are the sorts of awards you never expected, and they might live longer than, in some people's memory, than your rugby sport.
And the thing is, well, again, when you have a lot of time to think, and you know what, rugby was my greatest achievement, personally, I feel, my greatest achievement of all. But what happens is you influence people in other ways through what you do. So if by me being gay has influenced somebody who never knew I played rugby, yet finds out about my story and finds strength through my story, but will only remember me for being gay because that's how I've influenced them, then you can't change other people's thoughts. But they only think of you in a way because they think you've influenced their life in that way. So, you know, to me, I'm a rugby player, I'm gay. If somebody wants to put me as a gay rugby player or just a rugby player, I'm totally fine with it, because however they put it helps them, and I'm happy with that.
And a final thought, yes or no, I've read rumours there is going to be a Hollywood movie of your life. Is that true?
Yes, yeah, it's going to start filming hopefully in September. If the world of Hollywood's a crazy world, there's no time or dates, but last I spoke with them, which was a couple of days ago, in September we're hoping to start filming.
Who plays Gareth Thomas?
Can't say. Not allowed to say.
Well, we have to end there. I'll prompt you afterwards.
Okay,
Gareth Thomas, thanks very much for being on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.